I'm going on a business trip for the next 3 days, he announced. I wonder how many times I've been left alone on the weekends due to such trips. I'll be late due to overtime, he often said, resulting in countless nights without a family dinner. At first, I thought it was better not to know, but eventually my husband's repetitive actions received what he deserved. My name is Nancy, a part-time housewife at 44. My husband, Paul, is 46, a corporate employee at a certain company. While his work is not bad, he is a man who values his style and appearance above all else. We've been married for 19 years. The year after our wedding, our son William was born, and without any significant issues, our marital life has reached this point. Or so I wish I could say. The reality is that I've spent more than half of our married life being manipulated by my husband's lies. He was always worried about his smartphone. Initially, I thought it was work-related, but I'd occasionally see him typing away, and upon sneaking a peek, it was usually a conversation with someone on an instant messaging app. I didn't pay much attention at the time, but looking back, there were indeed many suspicious points. As his sudden overtime and weekend business trips increased, I began to feel something was off. Several summers ago, my husband, who was supposed to be on a 3-day business trip, returned home with a heavy tan. Why are you so tanned when you were supposed to be in a suit for a business trip? I went swimming with a client. It was part of the entertainment. A bit back at his absurd answer, but at the time, I only thought it was unfair that he had a fun time alone, reflecting how stupid I was. My often absent husband used work as an excuse to leave the care of his parents to me. A few years ago, my mother-in-law became disabled due to an injury, and my husband never once offered to accompany her to her hospital visits. He should have some paid leave, but he would blatantly ignore any calls from her. Thus, I'd have to take time off from my part-time job to accompany her. My mother-in-law was a strict person, possibly because she used to be a teacher of traditional calligraphy. I'm rather scatterbrained and prone to mistakes, so I often found myself on the receiving end of her harsh words. To be honest, I didn't like her that much, and I've discussed this with my husband many times. Could you please accompany her to the hospital next week? Your mother would surely want to see you. I would if I can, but there might be a company trip around that time. What? I've never heard about such a trip. Well, it was decided last weekend. I pressed him about this sudden company trip, but he refused to listen. In the end, I had to accompany my mother-in-law to the hospital, yet again. There was a weekend when my husband was surprisingly home. Our son, who was now in 5th grade, had been performing well in his soccer team, so I suggested that we go watch his game together. Every parent watching the children's game lost themselves in the cheer. Our son coordinated well with his teammates, leading the game solidly, and they achieved a splendid victory. Both parents and children were wildly excited about the team's results, and we, as a married couple, joined hands in joy after a long time. The one who approached us at this moment was a mother of a teammate, Patricia. Patricia was a very straightforward woman, and I quickly became friends with her. We would regularly share updates on our children's troubles, home affairs, etc., and began visiting each other's homes more frequently. My husband also got along well with her. Even if Patricia was still at our house when my husband came home from work, we actually felt glad. Our relationship deepened as friends of our marriage. In this way, we continued to have a family-wide relationship, involving not only our sons, but also Patricia's husband. One day, after several years of such interaction, Patricia suddenly started saying something surprising. I know this may sound odd, but doesn't your husband Paul seem to be pretty popular with women? An old man like him? No way. Well, the other day, I saw a man who looked just like Paul at a restaurant with a seductive woman. They looked really close. Patricia then gave a detailed account of what she saw my husband and the mysterious woman doing at the restaurant. Even I was stunned by what she described. Although shocked by Patricia's sighting, I was at a loss as to what to do about the sudden suspicion of my husband's infidelity. While I was still speechless, Patricia advised me to gather evidence first. You can't just vaguely accuse him of cheating, you need to confront him with evidence. She then proceeded to teach me several methods to gather evidence of infidelity. From then on, I could only view my husband with a suspicious eye, and our marriage became even more strained than before. Between our son's SATs, accompanying my mother-in-law to the hospital, my part-time job, and housework, I had plenty on my plate. It was a lot to add the task of looking for evidence of my husband's infidelity, but I did things like search his suit pockets when he was out. Then came that day. Although we had separate bedrooms for a long time, when my husband was away, I felt blissful spreading out on the large bed. I decided to do the same that night and went to the bedroom. When I changed the sheets and duvet and moved my husband's pillow to put mine in place, I found a bank book underneath. Upon inspection, I saw that a fixed amount was being transferred every month to the same person from the account under my husband's name. Checking the name, it read, Patricia Brown. Yes, that's right. To Patricia, our friend, he had been transferring about $300 every month. I silently took a picture of it with my smartphone. The next day was the day I had to accompany my mother-in-law to the hospital. Hey, Nancy, are you listening? It seemed I had been spacing out, thinking about the bank book from the day before. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening very well. Well, I saw Paul walking early in the morning. This was my mother-in-law's story. When she was riding in a friend's car through the residential area early in the morning for some errands, she saw my husband walking and entering an unfamiliar house. Who would he be visiting at such an hour? The only houses you could enter early in the morning would be families, right? As I listened to my mother-in-law's story, I recalled what Patricia had told me earlier. Proof of infidelity. I asked my mother-in-law to give me a general idea of the address in that town. Soon, it was crunch time for our son's college entrance exams, and he was attending cram school every day. The cram school fee was set to be automatically deducted from my husband's account, but I received a notice stating the fee could not be deducted 2 times in a row. I decided to ask my husband about it. The money for William's cram school, they said they couldn't deduct it from the account. Well, can you cover it for now? I'll pay you back later. My husband's behavior seemed odd. Still, I didn't want any conflicts before our son's exams, so I agreed to pay the fee for the time being. But then the same issue occurred the next month, and I had to confront my husband. I'm sorry, I have some debts that need to be settled. I promise to sort it out next month, he said. But by the next month, our son's college entrance exams would have started, and the cram school would be over. I was disappointed that my husband didn't even realize that. Then, our son's exams were successfully finished. He was accepted into the high-profile soccer school he had hoped for. It seems like he didn't make it, I heard. Patricia's son, Robert, had also aimed for the same high school as William, but unfortunately, he didn't pass. He was likely going to attend his backup private school. But according to my son, Robert had stopped appearing at school after the exams. He didn't even show up for the graduation ceremony, and I felt awkward contacting Patricia, so our communication ended there. As my son's high school life settled down, I found myself thinking about what Patricia had told me more frequently. There were several instances of my husband's suspicious behavior, and it was still continuing. At this point, I wanted to clear my mind of all the uncertainty, so I decided to seriously confront my husband. First of all, it was Patricia, whom I had stopped contacting for some time. I contacted her. Then she told me something shocking. Do you have plans for this weekend? Why the sudden question? This weekend, I'll probably be on a business trip from Friday. After confirming that, I called my husband's company on Friday. Hi, I was hoping to know the accommodation my husband is staying at on his business trip. I can't seem to reach him on his cell phone. That's strange. We don't have anyone out on business trips starting today. Feeling as if I knew what was going on, I misled the person from his company and ended the call. That night, I got into a car at a pre-arranged meeting place and headed towards a residential area. I was determined to obtain solid proof. After midnight, a man who looked like my husband and a slender woman got out of a taxi and went into the house. I quickly took a picture. Zooming in, it was clear that the man was my husband, and the woman's face was easily identifiable as well. Gathering one piece of evidence after another, I set the date for the confrontation. It was a few days after my husband returned from his business trip, looking exhausted. "I'll be late tonight again because of overtime." Upon hearing my husband's words, I responded with a grin. "Ah, our last supper then. Enjoy yourself." There was probably a profound sense of unease in my husband's face from my unexpected smile. He left, scratching his head. Little did he know, stepping into the worst occasion. That night, I hopped in the car again and headed to our designated meeting place. Arriving at the house where I had seen my husband enter with another woman, I rang the doorbell and turned the doorknob. "Good evening. Mind if I come in?" Startled by the unfamiliar voice, the woman who came out asked, Who are you?" "I thought my husband was here," I responded, pointing to a pair of men's shoes by the door. "Those belong to my husband." I was shocked to learn she was also married. Indeed, there were other men's shoes. Ignoring her, I barged in, saying, "Excuse me." A meal was set up on the table, as if they had just begun to eat. However, my husband was nowhere to be seen. Looking around, I noticed a window leading to the backyard was open. "Got him." Those were the words from Patricia outside the window. Yes, my husband had tried to escape through the backyard when he realized I was there. I confronted my husband and the married woman. "When did this start?" "It's been 1 to 2 years. Really, it's not that long." Listening to my husband justify that a 1 to 2 year affair wasn't long, I responded, 10 years, right? I know it. It's been going on for a long time. With that girl from your office, right? What are you talking about?" Upon hearing my words, both Sarah and Patricia twisted their faces in confusion. "I visited your office and spoke to a few people. You know how there are always some friendly, chatty folks who are happy to spill the beans? Well, they were quite kind to tell me everything. The rumors about you and a girl named Sarah. It seems you two were quite famous." "You went to my office? And they told you that?" "Indeed. When I mentioned that it seems like you have been betraying me for the past 10 years, people were all too eager to share what they knew." My husband, trembling slightly, looked lost, as if he was trying to figure out what he should do next. Seeing him like that, I decided to throw him another curveball. "You're shaking, aren't you? How will you manage with what's coming next?" As I finished speaking, the front doorbell rang. Sarah, who jumped up in surprise, rushed to the door, and I followed her. The visitor was Robert, my son's soccer buddy, and Patricia's son. When I invited Robert into the house, Patricia, who was already there, looked surprised and wide-eyed. "You live nearby with your father now, right, Robert? As I understand it, your parents suddenly fell out for reasons you still don't really comprehend, and you've reconnected with our son. You've been talking to me about it too. Let's clear things up here and now." I said this and looked at Patricia. "The woman my husband also cheated with was you, Patricia." Patricia looked at me in surprise and glanced down, unable to meet her son's gaze. Sarah seemed astonished too. "So it began when you met us, right? Pretending to get along with me while both of you were betraying me behind my back." I quickly wiped away my tears and turned to my husband. "Why were you transferring $300 every month to Patricia? Was it because you were paying her that we couldn't afford William's tutoring fees? How could you take money meant for our son's education and give it to your mistress?" My husband looked shocked that I knew so much, but he couldn't say anything in his defense. In response, Patricia's son Robert said, "Both my mother and you are despicable, dragging their families into this." Robert said that with a disdainful glare at the two before leaving. "It's your fault. You knew you were seeing this woman, and it wasn't about wanting money. You tried to appease me with money, didn't you?" Patricia suddenly broke down, hitting my husband's chest as she cried and accused him. My husband had begun an affair with Patricia while he was still seeing Sarah. Exasperated with this, Patricia had started to hint at the infidelity to me, thinking me as suspicious. My husband was trying to placate Patricia, all the while conscious of the gazes of Sarah and me. Sarah seemed angry, her face red, but I felt myself cooling off. It all started to feel ridiculous. Are you all crazy? Am I the only one who has to take responsibility in the end? But fine, I don't need a man like this. You two do as you please. I said that, handed the prepared divorce papers to my husband, and continued. I'll send all your stuff to your parents' house. They'll be charged on delivery, so you'll be hearing from your mother soon. But I was wrong. I truly cared only for you. Help me. As I tried to leave, my husband, looking desperate, tried to peel off the two women closing in on him and begged me. Why not ask your mother for help? I replied calmly and headed for the entrance. At the door, I bumped into an unfamiliar man. It looked like the Sarah's husband. I left the house with a smile, knowing that the unexpected return of the husband would stir up another row. Afterwards, we divorced. My husband's long-term misconduct became known not only to his parents, but also to his colleagues, and he was severely reprimanded by his stern mother. His credibility at work fell drastically, forcing him to resign. Patricia, who was his mistress, was handed divorce papers by her estranged husband, and seemed to have ended up completely alone. Sarah seemed to have moved somewhere, judging from the sale of her house. The scale of the consequences of my husband's long-term infidelity would probably shock him for the rest of his life. For me, since my husband's family had assets, I was able to receive a substantial alimony. It took courage to tell my son the truth, but he quietly listened to my struggles and told me that he too would do his best to live without any worries in the future. Now, I live peacefully with my son.